very significant winds. And the projections on just how high that wind is going to be vary, but we have to be prepared for some very significant winds that are going to bring down trees and power lines. So the message today is very similar to our message yesterday. Our teams are out there doing what they can to prepare. Our DPW team was out there all day yesterday and early this morning, checking those storm drains, making sure they're clear, coordinating with the MDC, which has been out there cleaning catch basins, and with Eversource, which has been pre-positioning resources. We also have called in a number of additional police and firefighters for today to make sure that we've got the resources to provide any support and any rescue assistance that's necessary. In a couple of minutes, I'm going to turn this over to our DPW director, but I also want to say I'm really grateful to be joined this morning by Congressman Larson and Senator Murphy. Our federal delegation has been in close contact with us and with cities and towns throughout the state over the last couple of days, and we're really grateful for that. And as you know, Governor Lamont has already sought a FEMA disaster declaration, and our federal delegation is a critical partner in that, a critical partner making sure that federal resources are available, and hopefully that we're able to get some financial assistance to the extent that this storm imposes a significant financial burden. But before I turn it over to them, I also just want to stress that while our teams are out there preparing and pre-positioning to respond, there are still things that you can do. So if you've got a basement that is prone to flooding and you haven't already moved things out of it, clear that basement. Protect your things in advance. If you don't already have your phones charged or batteries for those flashlights, now's the time to do it. The power could go out when that wind rises. If you don't already have water and groceries, you maybe have a little time to go grab them, but once we get to midday, we're really encouraging everybody to stay off the roads and stay put and just hunker down. The other thing that we've been asking folks to do, and I just want to reiterate it here, is number one, if you got elderly neighbors, neighbors who you think may need a little help, homebound neighbors, just wander over and check on them, knock on the door and make sure that they're okay and don't need anything. And then number two, if you've got a storm drain near your house, if you've got a catch basin near your house, keep an eye on it. If it's clear now, great. But if you start to see debris accumulating as the rain comes and as the winds rise, clear it off. I can make a big difference in making sure that that can continue to flow smoothly. Now, I want to stress, like we did yesterday, we're also asking for everybody's patience through this storm. This could be a very big storm with a lot of rain. We got a lot of rain a couple of days ago and the ground is already saturated. That means that we could see some really significant flooding again. So we will do everything we can to respond, to address those flooding areas where they rise up. But please be patient with us and please understand that we may be getting a couple of 100-year storms in the course of a couple of days, and the system's just not built to absorb that well. So lastly, let me just say that if you do need any help or if you see anything that you think needs the city's attention, the quicker you can bring it to our attention, the better. So call it in. If it's a true emergency, obviously you can use 911. You can use our non-emergency lines for anything that you just think needs to be dealt with. And again, once we get another hour or two past right now, once we get to midday, please stay off the roads. There's just, unless you absolutely have to be out there, stay off those roads. There's no reason to put yourself in a position where you could get stuck in floodwaters or where you could get hit by a downed tree. We do expect that there's a really good chance of road closures throughout this storm. So just stay off the roads. And as I said yesterday, pick out those board games, pick out some good movies, stay put, hunker down, and ride it out. There's a few additional pieces of information that I may share later. But why don't I turn this over first to our Director of Public Works, Mike Looney, for any quick additional updates from DPW. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, everyone. Right now, we have the bulk of our department actually out on patrol right now, checking out catch basins, make sure they're still clear from all the work we did yesterday. Our sanitation crews are out. Any garbage containers or recycling bins that have been put out, we're just tipping those this morning, just so we prevent anything from getting airborne or being in the road in terms of debris should the winds get stronger as we go on through the day. We're also making sure bulky waste is picked up and other items that we see that could be obstructions in the street or obstructions for catch basins, we're trying to get out and make sure we've got that all cleared up. Then we're sort of in a watch and wait mode and see how these winds might pick up later in the afternoon. Right now it seems the storm has tracked a little bit east of what was expected initially, so that is, I think, good news for us from a wind perspective, but it also may lead to us getting a little bit more rain. So we do have to prepare for the possibility of having heavy flooding rains, which we are doing now. We have our forestry crew and our street staff who support them in terms of removing down trees and clearing wood debris. We also have two tree contractors in with heavy equipment to address those issues as fast as possible. But as the mayor was saying, as soon as you see an issue, please, by all means, get in touch with us and let us know so we can respond rapidly and keep things under control. So that's really the latest from our department. I'll turn it back to the mayor at this point.
Great, thanks, Mike. One other quick thing I meant to share. If you're on a street that is typically prone to flooding, we encourage you to move your car to higher ground, to drier ground. We've made a number of lots available throughout the city. Most of them are the blue light lots that we use during snow parking ban emergencies. So the way to check that is to go to hartfordct.gov, our city website. Again, I don't want to go down the whole list because it's a long list of lots that are available to you. But if you are in an area that's prone to flooding, we encourage you to move your car off the street, both so that it doesn't get damaged and so that our first responders don't have to use their resources checking on those vehicles to make sure that everybody's okay. Now with that, I'm going to ask our incredible federal partners to say a few words. I just want to say, I'm not sure there are a lot of mayors who've got members of Congress and senators who don't wait to be called, but call first and say, what can we do to help? And at a time like this, that makes a big, big difference. So Congressman Larson, thank you for being here, and over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Bronin, and I commend the mayor, I commend Governor Lamont for being way out front and preparing for this, and a tip of the hat to the public servants, and especially Public Works, as you just heard Director Looney talk about, the effort that is ongoing by them. And heed the mayor's words. Listen to your local officials. Contact your local officials. But whether it's the fire department, whether it's the police department, emergency preparedness, common sense and practical application is important. Listen to what the news media has to say. Stay in touch so that you're aware of what's going on. And as the mayor elaborated, also check in on your neighbors, especially those who you think might be in need. And as he also indicated, stay off the roads. Stay off the roads, and I think people in the media may know this, but not everyone, but more drowning accidents happen with people in cars who end up going through deep water and get trapped. So heed this advice, stay safe, let's ride this out. But I wanted to thank the mayor. I'm honored to be joined by Senator Murphy and the entire delegation that led a letter to the president, to FEMA already, putting the federal government on notice as they are, and our ability to respond and make sure that the resources that are going to be required during and after this event with Henri, that the federal government is there to help. But again, I want to commend the governor and the mayor and all those public servants that are out protecting us. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thanks, Congressman Larson. And again, really grateful, Senator Murphy, for all your calls and support and for your being here this morning.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor. As a relatively new Hartford resident, let me thank my Public Works team, the city's public servants, for the tremendous job you do every day. Mayor, thanks for being vigilant, as always, about protecting the residents of this city. And again, let me add my thanks to the governor, who will be at the Emergency Operations Center all day today, managing the statewide response. Just a few things to add to the discussion. First, let me talk a little bit about the federal-state partnership. We have been in constant touch with FEMA over the last 48 hours. FEMA has pre-positioned assets in the New England region, including generators, food, and water, that can be brought to Connecticut as early as today to help manage the response. As both the mayor and John mentioned, we have already sent to the federal government a pre-disaster declaration request. We're essentially putting the federal government on notice that we are going to be requesting a disaster declaration, and that will help us get reimbursement to the state and to towns more quickly. Once this gets declared a disaster, and I think our expectation is that we will hit those thresholds, at least in some counties in Connecticut, we qualify for federal reimbursement. Now, depending on how bad this storm is, we may seek supplemental appropriations. Often, the normal course of FEMA reimbursement can cover the state's cost, but in exceptional cases, Congress may need to pass an additional emergency appropriation. So we will be sort of watching the response, watching the costs that are being incurred by state and federal governments, and we will do everything possible as a federal government to make sure that Connecticut's costs are covered. Next, let me just talk about the private sector response. We've got great crews here in Hartford that are going to do their best to mitigate flooding. But often the most difficult response comes from the private sector, comes from the electric companies, the cable companies, and the internet companies. I'm going to be heading straight from here to Eversource to meet with them, to make clear what our expectations are when it comes to getting power back on, should people lose it. I'll be on the phone later today with the cable and internet companies, and that message will be delivered jointly by the delegation to make sure that they understand that the amount of time that it took in previous storms to get the lights back on, to get people's internet connected again, was unacceptable and cannot become the norm. So I know that Eversource is pre-positioning crews and assets here in Connecticut, but we are going to be vigilant to make sure that if we do lose power, and I think we all expect that there will be some power loss today and tomorrow, maybe exceptional levels of power loss, that we demand better response, much better response from Eversource and other private utility companies than we have gotten in the past. And lastly, let's be clear about what's coming after this storm, a heat wave. We're expecting temperatures nearing 90 or in the 90s for the rest of the week. So that plea that the mayor made to keep an eye on your vulnerable neighbors, we're asking that you do that not just today and tomorrow, but throughout the week. Because if we lose power, then we lose the ability to cool our homes. And if we have a heat wave coming, we are going to have to pay attention, especially to our most vulnerable, about the need to potentially get them to places where there is cooling available. And we'll be working with the governor to make sure that there are cooling centers and the mayor set up around the state if necessary. So be vigilant today, but be watchful of your vulnerable neighbors throughout the week, because if we have power loss followed by a heat wave, we're going to continue to have people in potentially dire situations throughout the week. So listen, as a delegation, we obviously know that our mayors, our first selectmen, and the governor are the ones that are really managing this response. We're here as backup. We're here to help coordinate the interaction between the mayors and the governor and the federal response agencies, and we plan to be in constant communication over the course of today and tomorrow. So, Mayor, thanks for bringing us together today.
Thanks so much, Senator. I also just want to echo the thanks to our governor and the governor's team. As you know, they're working out of the Emergency Operations Center and have been in constant communication, and we really appreciate that partnership, in an active, constant partnership in preparation for this storm. I want to say one last thing, and then I'm going to turn it over to our Health Director, Liani Arroyo, who I'd like to ask her to give a couple of messages in Spanish in case there's anybody watching for whom that translation would be beneficial. And then we're happy to open it up for questions. So the last thing is, look, we're sitting here in Hartford and we're getting ready for a lot of rain and a lot of wind. We're lucky here that we're not getting the storm surge. But if you are watching and you're along the shoreline, just want to emphasize, if you're in an evacuation zone, please heed those warnings and evacuate. You don't want to take an unnecessary risk. So again, I'm thankful that we're not facing that storm surge here, but there are an awful lot of folks in Connecticut who are, and if you're watching and you're in that evacuation zone, take it seriously, heed that warning, don't put yourself at risk. Liani, over to you. Thank you.
Buenos días todos. Quiero hacer un breve resumen de lo que se ha dicho aquí hoy. Nuestro alcalde está dando una información acerca de las preparaciones que está haciendo la ciudad de Hartford. En este momento no es un huracán que ha llegado a Connecticut, es una tormenta tropical, pero no importa el nombre que sea, lo que importa es la lluvia y el viento, y bastante va a llegar hoy aquí a la ciudad de Hartford. Así que le estamos pidiendo a la comunidad que tome los pasos básicos otra vez para prepararse y a sus familias. Así que cargan sus teléfonos móviles, celulares. Por favor, si no han buscado comida o agua adicional, todavía tienen un poco de tiempo de hacerlo ya para el mediodía. Esperamos que aquí va a llegar toda esa lluvia y todo ese viento, así que tienen un poco de tiempo de poder ir a hacer eso. Pero después de eso, por favor, quédense en su casa. Si tienen una emergencia, por favor, llamen lo más pronto posible para poder recibir ayuda. Aquí los equipos de la ciudad de Hartford, del Departamento de Obras Públicas, ha estado trabajando desde ayer limpiando las carreteras para que se pueda ir el agua y no haya inundaciones. Pero sí estamos esperando que vayan a haber inundaciones en nuestra ciudad, porque como hemos visto, nos cayó mucha agua hace unos pocos días, mucha lluvia unos pocos días, y ya nuestro terreno, la tierra, está llena de agua y no va a poder con lo que viene hoy. Así que, por favor, prepárense, tengan todo lo que necesiten en su casa, quédense en casa para que el equipo de la ciudad de Hartford pueda hacer lo que tengan que hacer. Y le queremos dar también gracias a nuestra delegación federal. Ellos están trabajando al nivel del estado y también al nivel federal, estando seguros que vamos a tener los recursos necesarios, que las compañías eléctricas y las compañías de teléfono y de internet pueden hacer su trabajo también para que nosotros no nos quedamos si hay apagones o cortes de electricidad en la oscuridad. Pero otra vez, no importa que no sea un huracán que ha llegado a Connecticut, lo que importa es que va a llegar lluvia y va a llegar agua. Va a llegar lluvia y va a llegar viento, disculpa. Y así que necesitamos que todos se preparen y estén listos para eso en este momento. Gracias.
All right, thank you so much, Director Arroyo. We're happy to take questions. In addition to the folks you heard from, our fire chief, Chief Barco, our police chief, Chief Thody, are here as well. We're all happy to take any questions.
If something were to happen like flooding here in Hartford, where do you think people should be going? Are there any shelters or places?
Sure, and I'm just going to repeat the questions in case folks can't hear them. The question is about shelter that's available in the event that folks are displaced by flooding or anything else. We are going to have the Parker Memorial Center open as our primary shelter. To the extent that we have needs beyond that, we will open additional centers. The Arroyo Center would be our first backup, but we will open any facilities needed. Our hope is that that Parker Memorial Center, which has a fairly significant capacity, will be sufficient, but we are prepared to provide whatever shelter is necessary if that flooding is severe enough or, God forbid, anything else displaces folks in larger numbers.
Luke, you just mentioned 211
Thank
as
you.
the statewide
Yeah.
number.
Thanks, Senator. Yeah, Senator Murphy reminded me an important reminder, which is wherever you are, if you need shelter during this storm, the best thing to do is call 211. That is the statewide coordination team that will help you find the shelter that is best for you, depending on where you're located. So just call 211 if you've got a need for shelter in this storm. Thank you, Senator.
Mr. Mayor, I live in the Frog Hollow neighborhood. Many of my neighbors do not have air conditioning.
Yeah.
You talk about this heat wave, you open up these cooling centers, yet I think we've all stood outside those centers, and people don't often use them. How do you move that needle? How do you get folks in my neighborhood and other neighborhoods to take advantage of the resources that you're making available?
Well, look, looking ahead beyond this storm to the heat wave that Senator Murphy mentioned and that you're asking about, there are a couple of key messages. One of the most important things you can do in that situation is to be hydrated. So you gotta make sure that you're drinking a lot of water. I know it's strange to be thinking about a heat wave when we're in the middle of a tropical storm, but it is important to make sure that you're preparing for that. You're asking about the cooling centers. What we are focused on is making sure that we have those facilities available and that we spread the word as widely as we can so that everybody knows about those cooling centers, where they can go. People ultimately will make the choices that they feel are right for them about whether to stay at home or go to that cooling center, but we will always have them available and do our best to communicate and make sure we're spreading that word.
For Public Works, forgive me, Mike, I forget your last name, but curious what your message is to folks in this city. When is it appropriate to call your team? When should folks kind of just sit back and maybe wait when it comes to responding to issues in their own neighborhoods?
Last name's Looney, Looney. Really, if there's any sort of condition that occurs, whether it's flooding in the street or a tree that's down on power lines or blocking the road, those would certainly be instances where we'd want folks to call us in. Anything that looks like it could be a public hazard to public safety, whether it's impeding vehicles from getting around. So for example, our first responders, we need to know that if a street is blocked, to be able to tell the police and the fire department that there needs to be another route taken if they have an emergency. So anything that impacts the right-of-way or is, I would say, a flooding issue that could start affecting properties and not just ponding on the street, but when the street gets, if the street gets submerged or something like that, those would be those type of instances when they would definitely want to hear about that. I can get that to you after.
Senator, if no one else has a question, you spoke in your remarks about Eversource and power companies. You know the picture we saw following Isaias. We were with folks who were without power for a week, some more. What is the specific language you're taking to utilities, and what do you want those folks to know who were without power for that stretch and were saying, this can't happen again?
So we've been in touch with Eversource, frankly, in a constant dialogue since the last storm to make sure that they have as many assets as they can ready to go as soon as the power goes out. As I said, I'll be heading straight to Eversource from here to get a briefing and to make sure that they have made good on that commitment. But if there is massive power outage in the state, nobody should expect that even the most able utility can get it back on in 24, 48 hours. So people do have to take steps to be ready for the power to be out, potentially for multiple days. So we will keep the pressure on Eversource and UI to get the power back on as quickly as possible. But everybody needs to take steps now, whether it be using the next couple hours to get some non-perishable food in the house, making sure that your flashlights have batteries, making secondary accommodations should you be without power and air conditioning for a longer period of time. So we've been in constant dialogue with those companies, and as I said, it's not just the power company. We could be experiencing a loss of internet connectivity, and for a lot of families, that's not as serious as losing access to power, but it's still pretty important. So we're going to make sure to be vigilant about keeping in contact with the utilities over the next 24, 48 hours and through the rest of the week if we have significant power loss.
I just want to add one thing to this, the question about when to call, where to call. So needless to say, if there is any threat to life or safety, we want you to call 911. If you see floodwaters rising rapidly and there are cars in the street, we want you to call 911. If it is a more routine thing that you just want to make sure we're aware of, like a tree that's come down and is blocking the road, or you're starting to see some flooding, but it's not so severe that you're concerned about real threat to life or safety or property, the non-emergency number is 860-757-4000. 860-757-4000.